A surprising number of Americans leave Costa Rica within a year, and the reasons might not be what you expect. It's not because they run out of money or face danger. It's usually something unexpected that shifts over time, catching them off guard and pushing them to leave. We break down the real timeline of what happens after you move to Costa Rica, using insights from Expatistan, Budget Your Trip, and Internations to show you what most people don't see coming. Stick around to the end because the real reason Americans don't last might leave you in disbelief. The first few months in Costa Rica feel like you've stepped into the best decision of your life, and nothing can convince you otherwise. You wake up to sunlight pouring through the windows, the air warm but not suffocating, carrying the distant sound of waves or birds you've never heard before. The beaches don't look real at first. Long stretches of golden sand, water shifting between turquoise and deep blue, and sunsets that seem almost too perfect, like they were designed just for you. You tell yourself, this is what life is supposed to feel like. Then there's nature. It's everywhere. Lush green jungles press right up against roads and homes. Monkeys swing through trees like it's just another Tuesday. And the slow rhythm of the environment pulls you in. You're not rushing anymore. You're not stuck in traffic or staring at a screen all day. You feel free, like you finally escaped the noise and pressure you didn't even realize were weighing you down. And that feeling of freedom, it becomes addictive. No strict schedule, no early alarms, no real obligations yet. You explore instead. One day it's a hidden beach, the next it's a waterfall hike, and the day after that you're trying a local cafe you found by accident. Every moment feels like discovery, like you're living inside a vacation that somehow never ends. But quietly, in the background, something else is happening. You're spending more than you expected. Dinners out become routine. Tours, transportation, convenience, it all adds up. But you don't really notice it, or maybe you choose not to. Because how could you put a price on this kind of life? You tell yourself it's temporary, that you're just settling in, that it'll balance out later. There's also no real routine yet, no structure, no rhythm beyond what do I feel like doing today? And at first, that feels like the ultimate luxury. You've traded predictability for possibility, and it feels like a win every single time. This is the honeymoon phase, months 1 to 3, where everything feels amazing, almost unreal. It's the part where people look around, take a deep breath, and think, this is it. This is exactly what I was searching for. This is where people believe they've made the best decision of their life. And for a while, it truly feels like they have. Stick around as slowly but surely, reality begins to creep in. Around month 4, the dream doesn't disappear, but it starts to feel a little heavier. The shift is subtle at first. The skies don't stay as bright as they used to. The rainy season rolls in, not with a dramatic warning, but with a steady pattern you can't ignore. Mornings might still feel familiar, but by afternoon the clouds gather and the rain comes down hard, sometimes for hours. Roads get muddy, plans get canceled, and that spontaneous beach day you imagined suddenly depends on the weather. You start checking forecasts more than you ever thought you would. At the same time, daily life begins to take shape. The excitement of constant exploration fades, replaced by the reality of errands, responsibilities, and the need for some kind of routine. You're figuring out where to buy groceries consistently, how to pay bills, how to get things fixed when they break. It's no longer just about discovering hidden waterfalls. It's about getting through a normal Tuesday. And that's when the small frustrations begin to stack up. Nothing dramatic, nothing you can point to as a deal breaker, but enough to slowly wear on you. Service can feel slow, especially compared to what you're used to. A simple task that should take 10 minutes might stretch into an hour. You're told mañana more times than you can count, and you start realizing it doesn't always mean tomorrow. Logistics become their own challenge. Getting from one place to another isn't always straightforward. Deliveries take longer. Systems don't always work the way you expect them to. What once felt like charming differences now require patience you didn't know you'd need. And then there's the internet. On some days, it works perfectly fine, and on others, it doesn't cooperate at all, dropping out during important calls or slowing down when you need it most. At first, you laughed it off. Now, it starts to matter, especially if you're trying to work remotely or stay connected to life back home. None of these things are major on their own, but together, they create a shift in how the experience feels. The constant sense of discovery is replaced by repetition. The freedom you loved begins to feel a little less like liberation and a little more like unpredictability. You notice it in small moments, when plans fall through again, when something simple takes longer than expected, when the rain keeps you inside for the third afternoon in a row. And somewhere in that transition, a realization quietly sets in. You stop feeling like a traveler and start feeling stuck. Keep watching as we begin to feel the buildup of some tension. By month 7, it's no longer the rain or the routine that gets to you. It's the quiet accumulation of everything. What once felt affordable and carefree now starts to look different. The cost of living becomes harder to ignore. Groceries feel more expensive than expected, especially for the items you're used to. Rent, utilities, transportation. It all adds up in ways that didn't stand out during those first few months. Back then, spending felt like part of the adventure. Now, it feels like a pattern. You start doing the math more often, questioning small purchases, wondering how sustainable this really is long term. At the same time, the sense of isolation begins to creep in. In the beginning, solitude felt peaceful, even refreshing, but now it lingers a little longer than you'd like. You're far from familiar faces, far from the ease of old friendships and spontaneous conversations. Making deeper connections takes time, and cultural differences, subtle as they are, can create a distance you didn't expect. Even in a beautiful place, there are moments when it feels strangely quiet. You might find yourself missing things you never thought twice about before. Casual hangouts, reliable routines, even just feeling fully understood in a conversation. The excitement of being somewhere new doesn't carry the same weight anymore, and what's left is a gap between where you are and where you used to feel grounded. Then there's productivity, or rather, the lack of it. The environment that once inspired you to slow down now makes it harder to stay focused. The rhythm of the place doesn't always align with the demands of work or personal goals. Distractions are everywhere, from the constant pull of nature to the unpredictability of daily life. Tasks take longer. Motivation dips. You tell yourself you'll get back on track tomorrow, but tomorrow starts to look a lot like today. And it's not just about work. It's about momentum. That sense of forward progress you used to have begins to stall, replaced by a feeling that you're just maintaining, not moving ahead. By this point, many people look around and think, this has to be the hardest part. The novelty is gone, the challenges are real, and the initial excitement has worn off. It feels like you're stuck in the middle, too far in to turn it into a short experiment, but not fully settled either. But here's the twist most don't expect. Most people think this is the hardest part, but it's not. Make sure to watch all the way through to find out what the hardest part is. That leads to the breaking point. By month 10, the question you've been avoiding finally shows up, and it doesn't leave. It starts quietly, almost like a passing thought, but this time it sticks. The numbers don't feel abstract anymore. Money stress becomes real. You're no longer estimating or brushing things off. You're calculating. Every expense feels heavier, every unexpected cost more frustrating. What once felt like a flexible lifestyle now demands structure. And if that structure isn't there, the pressure builds fast. At the same time, the loneliness hits differently. It's no longer just occasional silence. It's the absence of something deeper. the kind of connection that doesn't require effort. You might have acquaintances, even a few friends, but it's not the same as the support system you left behind. There are moments, small, ordinary moments, where you wish you had someone who just gets it without explanation. And those moments start to add up. Then there's the lifestyle itself. The very thing that once felt freeing now becomes a source of frustration. The slower pace, the unpredictability, the constant adjustments, it wears on you. Things still take longer than expected. Plans still fall through. Systems still don't run the way you're used to. But now, instead of adapting easily, you feel resistance. What used to feel like charm now feels like friction you can't escape. And somewhere in the middle of all that, the doubt finally surfaces. Clear, direct, and hard to ignore. Did I make the wrong move? It's not a dramatic breakdown. It's more like a series of quiet realizations. You compare your current life to the one you left behind. Not just the stress, but the stability, the predictability, the ease of certain things you used to take for granted. And for the first time, you're not just romanticizing Costa Rica, you're questioning it. This is the breaking point, months 9 to 12. The phase no one really talks about in detail, but almost everyone feels in some way. It's where the experience stops being an adventure and becomes a decision. Because at this stage, something has to give. This is where people either adapt or start planning their exit. Some begin to recalibrate. They build routines, find their rhythm, adjust expectations, and slowly create a version of life that actually works, not just one that looks good on paper. They accept the trade-offs and lean into what truly matters to them. Others start looking at flights, not impulsively, but practically. They tell themselves it was a great experience, that they learned a lot, but maybe it's time to move on. Maybe this wasn't meant to be permanent after all. And the truth is, both paths are more common than you think. You'll want to know why most people leave at this point in time. Trust me. Most people don't leave Costa Rica because of one dramatic moment. They leave because of a slow realization they can't ignore anymore. By the time the 1-year mark approaches, the story has changed. What began as excitement, freedom, and possibility has settled into something more complex. And for many, 3 core pressures start to define that final decision. The first is financial reality. In the beginning, spending felt flexible, even justified. You were building a new life after all. But over time, the numbers stopped being forgiving. Groceries, rent, transportation, healthcare, and the little conveniences you didn't think twice about begin to reveal their true weight. Maybe income hasn't scaled the way you expected, or remote work feels less stable than it once did. Savings start to dip, and suddenly the lifestyle that once felt liberating begins to feel expensive in a way that's hard to sustain. It's not always a crisis, but it's enough to make you question how long you can realistically continue. The second is a lifestyle mismatch. What you imagine Costa Rica would be versus what it actually is day in and day out doesn't always align. The slower pace that once felt refreshing can start to feel limiting. The unpredictability that once seemed charming can become exhausting. You realize that living somewhere is very different from visiting it. The things you are willing to adapt to in the short term become harder to accept long term. And slowly, you start to miss the efficiency, structure, or familiarity you used to have. Then comes the third, and often the most underestimated, lack of purpose or structure. In the honeymoon phase, freedom felt like the ultimate goal, but over time, too much freedom without direction can feel ungrounding. Without a clear routine, meaningful work, or a strong sense of progress, days begin to blur together. You might stay busy, but not necessarily fulfilled. There's a difference between relaxing and feeling like you're moving forward. And when that difference becomes clear, it can be unsettling. What's important to understand is that it's rarely one big problem that pushes people to leave. It's not usually a single bad experience or a sudden breaking point. Instead, it's small problems stacking up over time, a delayed payment here, a frustrating errand there, a quiet weekend that feels a little too quiet, a moment of doubt that lingers longer than expected. Individually, these things seem manageable, but together they create a shift in how life feels on a daily basis. And that shift is what ultimately drives the decision. So when people leave after a year, it's not because Costa Rica failed them or because they failed at making it work. It's because the reality of the life they built didn't quite match the life they were hoping to live. What we reveal to be the real reason Americans don't last in the country is something that you do not expect. The real reason most Americans don't last in Costa Rica isn't what you think. It's not the country, it's the way they try to live in it. Because the truth is, it's not Costa Rica. The beaches are still beautiful, the nature is still breathtaking, and the lifestyle is still slower and more intentional. What actually happens is much more subtle. People try to live a permanent vacation without building a sustainable life. In the beginning, that approach feels right. Why wouldn't it? You've just left a structured, often stressful environment behind. You want freedom, flexibility, and space to breathe. But over time, that lack of structure starts to reveal cracks. There's no routine anchoring your days. You wake up whenever, do whatever. And while that sounds ideal at first, it eventually creates a sense of drift. Days blur together, and without realizing it, you lose momentum. There's also no long-term plan. Many arrive thinking they'll figure it out once they're there. But months pass, and nothing solid takes shape. Income, housing, goals, community, everything stays a bit temporary, and temporary doesn't hold up well over time. Then there's the lack of integration into local life. It's easy to stay in an expat bubble, frequent familiar places, and build a routine that feels comfortable but disconnected. Without deeper roots in the local culture, language, or community, it can start to feel like you're living near Costa Rica, not actually in it. And that's when the bigger realization hits. You can't escape your life by changing your location. The things you were trying to leave behind, lack of direction, burnout, dissatisfaction, don't automatically disappear. They just show up in a different setting. But here's the part most people don't hear enough about. Costa Rica can absolutely work. The difference isn't luck, and it's not about whether you fit in or not. It comes down to how you approach it from the very beginning, and whether you treat it like a real-life transition or just an extended escape. The people who actually stay long-term tend to do three things differently, and these patterns show up again and again. First, they build structure early. They don't wait for life to naturally fall into place or assume motivation will carry them indefinitely. Instead, they create routines that ground their days, set working hours, consistent habits, and personal boundaries that keep life from turning into chaos. They also learn how to balance freedom with responsibility, so the lifestyle feels intentional rather than random. In short, they don't rely on Costa Rica to organize their life. They take ownership of it themselves. Second, they choose their location strategically. This is a big one. It's easy to be drawn to places that look amazing on social media. Beachfront views, jungle backdrops, postcard sunsets, but living somewhere is very different from visiting it. The people who make it long-term think practically. They look at things like reliable internet, access to healthcare, transportation, grocery stores, and whether there's a real community they can plug into. They understand that convenience and connectivity matter just as much as scenery, especially when this isn't a 2-week trip, but your everyday reality. And third, they treat the move like a life decision, not an extended vacation. That mindset shift changes everything. Instead of operating in temporary mode, they start building something that can actually last. They think about income stability, long-term finances, and what their life will look like, not just next month, but next year and beyond. They invest in relationships, both with locals and other long-term residents, and they actively work to create a sense of belonging instead of waiting for it to happen on its own. Because the people who succeed don't chase paradise, they build stability. And when they do, Costa Rica becomes more than just a beautiful escape. It becomes a place where life genuinely works. Costa Rica can absolutely work, but only if you understand this pattern before you go. To give you a more realistic picture of what life in Costa Rica is like on a daily basis, don't miss the other videos we've prepared on Costa Rica living.